Good evening and welcome. This is a meeting of the Special Education Advisory Committee of the Halton District School Board for Wednesday, March 26, 2025. First, we will start with a roll call to record who is in attendance. Please answer yes or present. Katie, did you want to do roll call this evening or should I just proceed?
Sorry, Carol, can you do it, please? I have a very loud child in the background.
Absolutely. Okay, so we will start with Tara.
Present.
Good evening. Kate Lembecker.
Present.
Amanda.
Here.
Jennifer Laguerre.
Present.
Sierra Kernick. Don't think we have Sierra this evening, correct? Melissa Dockeray.
Present.
Good evening. We have regrets from Sophia Siddiqui. Aaron Sproul.
Present.
Kaisa Klassen.
Present.
Katie, we know you're here with us this evening. Trustee Jinyi Zhang.
Present.
Trustee Naveed Ahmed. Oh, okay. I think Trustee Ahmed will be joining us later. And we have with us Superintendent Ruddick, Principal Conan Spruan, and special guest Rosanna Bashaglia. And I think that is our roll call. Did I miss anybody? Oh,
Yep. Hi, Yelena King from CDL.
Oh, hi. Good evening, Yelena. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll start our meeting by honoring the land. Halton, as we know it today, is rich in history and modern traditions of many First Nations and the Métis. From the Anishinaabe to the Attawandaron, the Haudenosaunee, and the Métis, these lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. As we gather today on these treaty lands, we have the responsibility to honor and respect the four directions: land, waters, plants, animals, ancestors that walk before us, and all the wonderful elements of creation that exist. We would like to acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for sharing their traditional territory with us. First, we will approve the agenda for tonight's meeting. Would anyone like to move a motion to approve the agenda? Thank you, Amanda. Would anyone like to second the motion? Thanks so much, Katie. Are there any modifications or amendments that need to be made to the agenda? If so, please indicate your wish to speak by raising your hand. Okay, seeing none, I'll just ask if there's any opposition to the agenda as it stands. None being seen, the agenda is approved unanimously. Next, we will approve the February 19th, 2025 meeting minutes. Is anyone aware of any errors or omissions in the minutes from our last meeting? Okay, seeing none, would anyone like to move a motion to approve the minutes? Thank you, Katie. Can anyone second that motion, please? Yelena, great, thank you so much. If there's no opposition to the minutes as recorded, we will approve unanimously the February 2025 meeting minutes. Thank you so much. So we'll now move on, to begin our action items for this evening. The first one is focus group design. So as I mentioned, we have a special guest with us this evening, Dr. Rosanna Bashaglia, who is joining us to seek input from our committee members on how best to capture the insights of our students and student voice who have disabilities. So if it's okay, Dr. Bashaglia, I will pass the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Baxter, and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I will not take too much of your time, and if I may, I would like to just present. I have a quick slideshow, and I will also ask for Superintendent Ruddick to jump in at any time. Okay, so confirming that everyone can see the slideshow. Okay, thank you. So I'm here today to talk about a motion that was put forth on January the 7th by the Board of Trustees. And the motion seeks to collect data on the insights from all HDSB students regarding their experiences of all forms of hate and discrimination at school, and their feedback on the effectiveness of the application of existing tools to address hate and discrimination in school. The work to date to fulfill the motion has been we launched a student survey for all grade 9 to grade 12 students to participate. And this survey invites students to comment on an exhaustive list of hate and discrimination types, including disability discrimination. We also conducted several focus groups with target groups, including 2S and LGBTQ plus students, our Arabic identifying students, Palestinian students, and Jewish students on anti-Semitism. And my apologies, I noticed a misspelled word there. And Muslim students on Islamophobia. So we've completed all of these focus groups, and we're now looking for feedback on how to gather the voice of students with disabilities. And we're particularly looking to gather their experiences with hate and discrimination as it relates to disability, and their insights on the effectiveness of HDSB's response to those incidents. So I would like to open it up to the floor for comments and questions, and as well as any recommendations that individuals might have for how the methodology can best capture a variety of disabilities.
Thank you, Dr. Brishaglia. Does anyone have any questions about this project or comments on what's being looked at? Or perhaps any insights or advice to offer to staff as this work begins with our students?
Hi, I was wondering if you could just walk us through some of, do you have the data now? Do you know what the results are, or is this in process?
So do you mean the data of the student survey? It's still in process, but as of maybe 3 weeks ago, we had about 1,300 responses. And certainly disability discrimination was amongst one of those selected categories. We haven't begun the data analysis of those responses because most of them are open text responses. But our concern really is whether the survey methodology is inclusive for students with a range of disabilities. And so, I certainly have some ideas, but I really wanted to have this group provide some feedback on how to best capture student voice, and again, particularly with disabilities.
Okay, thanks.
Jennifer, go ahead.
Thank you. Great question. And I love this. And I'm wondering, with our CPP kids, and I know we changed the name of it and it's escaping me right now, what about the kids whose reading abilities or have learning disabilities in the communication area? Are we doing these verbally? Are we doing them together as a class kind of thing? So teacher reads the question, kids then get to go and answer the questions. How is that going to be facilitated for those groups?
Great question. And this is exactly the type of conversation and discussion and feedback that I'm here to gather. The methodology would not include teachers gathering the information. It would be, if it were to be an in-person meeting, it would be staff from the research department who are trained in research ethics and methodology. And because we're asking for reports of incidents that may have happened in the classroom, we generally would avoid having a classroom educator or any adult from the school present in that environment, so to not introduce bias. However, I recognize that, there's exceptions given the sensitivity of some of the student populations. And so again, I'm here to gather those thoughts and feedback.
I'm going to jump in. It's Jennifer. Okay. And I'm just thinking from a negative mindset, and I don't want to be a negative Nelly. How in these classrooms is the researcher going to be able to go in and very quickly build the relationship and confidence for the students to be able to feel safe to share their experiences? But secondly, I'm going to come back to my secondly. How is the researcher going to go in and really build that relationship? I just know from experience that very often these kids are closed-mouthed and not necessarily willing to share. So that might require having that teacher input or having familiar staff to help mediate that.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jennifer. I think these are the kinds of comments, again, that I'm looking to receive, and also looking for the group for some recommendations or best practices that we can then consider and take back to revise the methodology.
Thanks, Rosanna. Rosanna, can I help you to take down your slide deck so we can see you now when we're having this conversation? I really appreciate that. I wonder, to Jennifer's point, but also hearing your from a research perspective, having the educators in the classroom, would it be appropriate to have a focus group that was parent and student?
That is absolutely a possibility. We could also offer a parent standalone focus group and then hear from them in terms of their suggestions of how to best approach their student. I know that sometimes students are hesitant to be fully transparent with what they might have experienced because they don't want their parents maybe to be upset or surprised. Sometimes youth don't share all of their experiences with their parents. So that's just another layer that I think we need to also consider. But if this group feels that that might be the best course of action, parents and students together, I'm happy to provide that opportunity.
Jennifer, did you have a follow-up question? Okay, so we'll move on. Katie, go ahead.
Oh, okay, wonderful. Thank you. Well, thank you. I really appreciate that you're coming to SEAC to, gather our insights, because obviously when we're talking about the special education community, it's very diverse. I used to be a researcher myself, and I think with this group, there is so much nuance that you need to take into account. And I think there have been some good ideas. Certainly, I think you can have those interviews potentially with parents. Some of the kids, I believe that you'll be able to have an honest conversation, maybe verbal, maybe through their assisted devices. I don't know what that looks like. I would caution for a lot of these kids, as Jennifer brought up, there is a huge component of trust with these kids. And it's not necessarily like they're not willing to share their experiences, but they need to be able to trust that they can communicate appropriately with you. And I think that sometimes what that would necessitate from your team as researchers is facility with their devices. So for instance, my son, while he's young, he uses a talker to communicate. And if you, and there's not a member of your team who's familiar with that device, you might not be able to get the kind of responses that you're looking for. There's also, as you know, when we're talking about communication, it's not just verbal and it's not just their talk, like using an assisted device. There is nuance to their body language and stuff that I think is very meaningful that you would want to take in. So I think you're probably looking at like maybe potentially interviews with the students, and maybe you do need an educator there who isn't necessarily participating, but is able to assist with communication or just have that component of trust. So you could do that. You could definitely do the parents because they're going to be very likely the most informed in terms of, you know, my son's never going to come home and say, I had a bad day at school, or that would be unlikely. But I can tell you based on his mood and his energy that day, like whether something's been off. And then I think you do talk to the educators as well, especially the EAs. Because they're going to hear and see things that parents won't have the visibility to. So I think it's like a component of like multiple groups where you're gathering information and then looking to condense that and come to kind of general themes and conclusions. But I so appreciate that you're coming to us because this is a very lived experience and it would be hard for a researcher to see that unless it was part of your daily life. And I think Melissa's been waiting patiently.
Thank you, Katie.
Go ahead, Melissa.
I'm just going to second what Katie said. To me, I think the most important people you need to access for this information is, in fact, the EAs. They're the ones, in certainly with the nonverbal students and the students that have difficulty with communication. They are most familiar with their communication methods, their equipment, but also they see them on a day-to-day basis, and they might actually cognitively understand bullying a little bit more even than the individual student. So definitely, I think not having staff or going on this rule that you don't want staff impacting the outcome of the survey. I think EAs, straddle that role between being with the student a lot of the day and seeing a lot of what happens, with a little bit of a, obviously a supervisory role, but I think they'd be absolutely critical to consult if we're to get a fair assessment.
Okay, thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, everyone. Is there any other questions or comments for Dr. Brasheglia before we let her go? Okay. Seeing none, I'd just like to say thank you so much, Dr. Brasheglia, for joining us this evening and for the work that you're doing.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Okay, so we're moving on to our next action item this evening, which is the IPRC review and appeals process. Continuing our review and discussions around the special education plan standards, tonight we're looking at standard number 5. And we will start off the conversation with a presentation by our committee members, Jennifer Laguerre and Amanda Winch, who represent Autism Ontario at this table. And then we will move into breakout groups for some discussion and feedback. So I will pass it over to Jennifer and Amanda. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
I am going to try this tech stuff and share my screen, so you're going to have to bear with me for a sec.
Look at you go, Amanda. Nicely done.
Look at me go. All right. So we're here from Autism Ontario to talk about the IPRC, the review and the appeals process. I'm here with Jennifer. Aha, look at me go. So what is an IPRC? IPRC stands for Identification, Placement, Review Committee. It's a legally mandated process that ensures students with special needs receive the appropriate support. This committee includes school officials and specialists who make informed decisions about the identification and placement of students. Families can play an essential role in helping the school team understand students, as well as their strengths, challenges, and interests. Autism Ontario encourages students to participate in their IPRC meeting whenever possible. This helps the student to learn to advocate for themselves and provide any input that they may have whenever possible. The purpose of the IPRC is to formally identify and place students, review the appropriateness of students' identification and placement at least once every school year or as needed, and they can make recommendations as to programs and services. Jennifer?
Awesome, thank you. IPRC decisions can look at exceptionalities, so behavioral, communication, intellectual, physical, or multiple exceptionalities, and they can also look at placement options. So regular class with indirect support, so maybe they're going to go out to a resource room at some place, regular class with resource assistance, so perhaps there is a TA assigned in the classroom, regular class with withdrawal assistance. Again, they can go to a resource room, a special education class, or a full-time special education class. The determining factor for the provision of special education programs or services is the need of the individual student, and that is based on the individual's assessments of strengths and needs. Exceptionalities, as listed there, are broad categories to address the wide range of conditions that may affect someone's ability to learn, and they're meant to include a wide variety of medical conditions that can lead to particular types of learning difficulties. The Ministry of Education is the one that outlines those 5 different types of exceptionalities and their policy definitions. So they don't necessarily reflect medical or social models. For example, behavioral is a learning disorder characterized by specific behavioral problems like a struggle with relationship, excessive fears or anxieties, compulsive reactions, some other inability to learn that can't be attributed to anything else. Communication exceptionalities include diagnoses like autism, deaf and hard of hearing, language or speech impairments, and learning disabilities. Most children with autism are identified under this category, and the criteria from the ministry outlines autism as a severe learning disorder. Intellectual. This includes giftedness as well as mild intellectual or developmental disabilities. Physical could outline blind or low vision or others, several physical limitations. And 5, the multiple categories. So if they have a comorbid physical diagnosis like autism and a learning disability, or cerebral palsy and a developmental disability. So that is our multiple category. Oh, am I doing 4-2, Amanda? I'm sorry. Steps to the IPRC process. We get a referral by the student, the parent, or the principal. and really it can be requested by any of those. If requested by a family or student, it has to be submitted to a principal in writing, and the principal then has 15 days to respond in writing to acknowledge that they received the request, provide a date or an approximate date to meet, and to provide a copy of the board's working together documentation. The family must receive a written notice minimum of 10 days prior to meeting, although they can waive that in consultation with the administration. And they will also then receive that copy of the Haltons working together. A school-based IPRC is when generally the identification and placement of the student, it's not expected to change. The special education resource team recommends new or different identification with the placement, or when the SRT recommends demission, so leaving from a self-contained class, when that's aligned with the parents' wishes. You might have a regional IPRC if the school resource team recommends a new placement in a self-contained classroom or a new identification with multiple exceptionalities. Parents are always free to disagree with the school resource team recommendation, and they are allowed to request a transfer to a regional IPRC. Once the decision in the IPRC is made, so within that IPRC, we'll discuss programs and services, recommendations to put into the IEP, review assessments, discuss, and the statement will be sent to a family within 10 school days of what the IPRC has decided. Family then has the opportunity to review it, sign if it's an agreement, or appeal. And the decision statement is legally binding once it's signed.
Thanks, Jennifer. Apparently I was on mute. I was going to do that slide, but we'll switch. So, possible next steps. What happens if the parent doesn't agree with the decision that the IPRC has provided? So they have a right to reconvene the IPRC. Parents must give principal written notice within 15 calendar days of receiving the IPRC statement of decision letter. The parent can then request mediation. This can go through the coordinator, special education services, and basically get an opportunity to try to resolve any outstanding issues that the parent may have not been able to get addressed, or maybe didn't feel was addressed adequately at the original IPRC. In some cases, it may be determined that a meeting with the parents or guardians and the school board staff may be sufficient to settle any outstanding matters, while in other cases it may be necessary to engage the services of a mediator as a neutral third party. The timeline. So the two members must be appointed within 15 calendar days of receiving the appeal notice. One of the members is chosen by a parent, like by the parent or guardian, and the other is chair selected by two members by the school. The appeal board meeting must take place within 30 days of selecting the chair, unless the parent or guardian agrees in writing to a later date. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Awesome. What can be appealed? So specifically, if parents or guardians can appeal by writing to the Director of Education if they disagree with their child being identified as exceptional, or with their child not being identified as exceptional. They can also appeal the placement decision. when they appeal and write to the Director of Education, they have to be specific in the decision that they would like to challenge and a clear explanation of their reasons for disagreeing. Amanda went through the 3-member appeal board and the timeline for that. If you flip to the next slide too, Amanda. Yeah. So there you can see the membership of the panel. We have a 3-member. One is chosen by the board, 1 member is chosen by the parent, and a chair is selected by 2 members. And it has to take place within 30 days of selecting the chair. And the panel can then uphold the IPRC decision or recommend changes. The board has 30 days then to respond to the decision of the appeal board. However, they don't have to accept the SEAB's recommendations. If they don't and the parent is not satisfied, the next and final step is to be heard at the Ontario Special Education Tribunal.
So what is the Special Education Tribunal? This is a tribunal that resolves disputes between parents and guardians and the school board about a student's special education, identification, and placement. Parents and guardians can appeal to the Ontario Special Education Tribunal if they disagree with the decision of the IPRC and the Special Education Appeal Board ruling. The tribunal is the final step in the appeal process. Parents and guardians must submit a written appeal using the notice of appeal form within 30 days of the Special Education Appeal Board decision. A tribunal panel reviews the case and makes a binding decision on the student's placement and identification.
Remember, the IPRC is the key to unlocking all of the supports and resources and accommodations for your student with exceptionalities and learning needs. And it's really, really important to make sure that when families understand what is available and how that whole process works and know that they're heard, that's going to set the foundation for a strong working relationship with good communication. The benefits of this IPRC decisions are legally binding. It gives families a voice at the table. Students, if they are able, in discussions, they're in the room with the decision makers, and it's essentially, it allows for a spotlight on students and their needs. Autism Ontario does have a bunch of different resources. If those are needed, there's the Back to School collection, there's the IEP, a plan for student success. There's also 5 steps to the IPRC meeting and what it is and why it matters. So there are those resources available too. And that is it. Thank you very much.
Pending any questions, we're done.
Thank you so much. Sorry, everything's moving. There we go. Thank you so much, Amanda and Jennifer. I thought I saw a hand raised. Oh, there we go. Please go ahead.
Hi, thanks. Sorry, I was in the stairwell, so I had to run upstairs where there was light. I just, with deaf and hard of hearing, we don't have a lot of challenges with IPRCs because it's kind of an objective test. I mean, either you're deaf and hard of hearing or you're not. And it comes down to an audiological exam. I was just curious to understand what some of the other experiences are from other organizations where there are about IPRCs.
Sorry, at the end of your question, you were kind of breaking up, so I don't know if that was just me or if that was everyone, but I didn't catch the end of your question.
Oh, sorry. I was just wondering, wanting to get some an understanding of what kind of disputes are involved, in IPRC identifications. Like, is it, that that the student doesn't meet the criteria for an exceptionality, or is it the level of the exceptionality that gets identified? Like I said, I don't have an experience with that, so I'm just curious to understand.
That's a
what some of the
fantastic
disagreements
question,
are.
because I'm going to jump in, and I'm only going to do that. Catherine, I'm very sorry I see your hand because I was part of the presentation. I know from families that I've spoken to whose children have a diagnosis of autism is that sometimes they're told they're not autistic enough to need that support. I have thoughts about that, but that is definitely something that I have heard.
Go ahead, Catherine.
So because gifted identification is very much a numbers-based identification with a very high threshold, there are often children who the parents feel that they have a specific need that is not being met in the classroom, but they do not qualify for self-contained services because of the way the testing results are used. Particularly, I've seen this with the screening with the CCAT, because that's sort of a screening tool before there would potentially be more evaluation, and it's that sort of gray area where some parts of the screening may be incredibly high, like incredibly 99th percentile high, but just because other ones are not, or they might be 96 or 97 percentile, and it just doesn't work to meet the screening criteria, and sometimes not even qualify for secondary screening covered by the board. And there's often a lot of upset because of the divide between parents who can afford to do the secondary screening themselves and those who cannot, and really rely on the board's psychologist to make an identification because they cannot afford to do private assessment. So that's obviously a really sensitive area. If a parent believes that their child is not doing well in their home classroom and they're shut out because of who knows, it might have been literally one question on an evaluation that ended up being the reason their child doesn't get services, and that can be really incredibly upsetting for parents. So that's my perspective.
Thanks so much, Catherine. I think Superintendent Reddick, did you want
to? Thanks for this question, Erin. I will say in the 4 years that I have been working in this portfolio, we have not had an appeal. And I think that really speaks to the work that's being done in schools to support students. You don't need an identification or an IPRC to receive services. The ministry is very clear on that, and that's why we have many students that have an IEP, an unidentified IEP. So those are students that haven't been through the IPRC process but are still receiving supports and services through the department. I will say that where we have come close to an appeal is where a student doesn't meet criteria for an exceptionality, but they want a placement regardless. So a student who is not diagnosed with a learning disability, but they want a small class setting and therefore want a placement in an ARC class. That's where we have come close, but we have been managed to support the student in different ways within the regular classroom and have been successful, and in the end, parents were satisfied. But I will say that it is a very rare occurrence in Halton, and that's a real testament to the work of staff in our schools.
Thank you. Amanda, go ahead.
I just wanted to kind of finish off with that. The one thing that I actually learned in the last 2 weeks, as my son is transitioning from junior school to high school, was that when we transferred boards, the IPRC does not carry with your student. So I think that needs to be a little bit more documented somehow or brought to parents' attention, because in my experience, we had the IPRC done in Halton, transferred to Peel. I don't believe I was told in Peel that I needed to redo it. And I definitely wasn't told when we transferred back to Halton. And so it was only upon reviewing his IPRC and needing to go to a new board that I was then told that he wasn't identified under the IPRC anymore because we had transferred boards and hadn't got a new IPRC done.
Yeah, thanks for raising that, Amanda. I think that is often a surprise for families when they're moving into the region. And I will add to that that it's not only that the IPRC does not carry with the child from board to board, but each school board comes up with their own criteria for the exceptionalities. So the ministry provides a broad definition, but does not define it based on specific criteria, as in the example that Kate shared. It does not provide the specific cutoff scores for gifted. That's decided by each school board. And so a student can meet criteria in one school board, but then moves to Halton and might not meet the criteria in our school board. And so there have been, questions to the ministry around a provincial criteria and such. But at this point in time, based on the feedback that we received, there's not an interest in going down that road. That it remains with school boards, and the IPRC also remains with school boards.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments before we move? I think the plan is to move into breakout sessions as well. So we can, if there's any other questions or thoughts that come to mind as we transition into our breakout rooms, we'll have an opportunity to chat soon. So I'll go ahead and let staff facilitate that. Okay, thank you. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We will move now to item 2.3, which is a presentation by Principal Spruan on roles and responsibilities of educational assistants. So,
Okay. Thank you very much, Trustee Baxter. I'm just going to share my screen right now. Hope everyone can hear me okay. Oops, wrong button. Let's try that again. Okay. Okay, I trust that everyone can see there. So I thought I would just do is give a little overview, just in terms of, I won't take up too much of people's time, just in terms of educational assistance in our system, and just give a little more information and background in terms of that. So the contents I'm going to talk about is I'm just going to sort of set the context there in terms of educational assistance, and the role of the educational assistant. I'm going to talk about knowing the learner and determining how we allocate and use in our system some of our EAs. I'm going to go through some more specifics of the role and responsibility of the EAs in our school, and then just kind of conclude with the deployment within schools and the role of the SES, Special Education System Department. So what I've got there is setting the context. I don't want to read all the words in the slides, but the role of the educational assistant is to support the personal care, safety, and alternative curriculum in our program. So I just want to give a little context in terms of educational assistance in our system. So next year, we don't know the exact number yet, but the HDSB will serve approximately 67,000 students in 2025, 2026. We have slated approximately next year 885 full-time equivalent educational assistants. So to give context, there are 67,000 students, and there's approximately 885 full-time equivalent EAs in our system. We spread those EAs out across about 110 educational sites. So that's obviously elementary and secondary schools, but we also have a few of our community partners where we do have HDSB students at some sites that are outside of HDSB sites. But we do run some programming with some of our community partners. Just to give an example, we have a wonderful program called Project Search that services many of our young adults, helping them build skills to gain employment and some personal living skills and personal care skills. And that is run out of Oakville Trafalgar Hospital. And we do have some EAs who work in that field in there. And then we also have some other locations around the Halton District School Board, or sorry, around the Halton region, my mistake, where we do support EAs where we have students in different sites. So as it says there, the role of the EA is to support the personal care, safety, and alternative programming curriculum. Students may or may not have been identified through the IPRC process, but students do not have to be through the IPRC process to have the support of an educational assistant. We support our students through a shared support model. Students receive EA support when appropriate, and we cluster them with other students whenever we can. So if we have opportunities to cluster students in classes or in programs or in areas of the building, we try and do that if they require similar supports. We also have certain students that receive certain supports at specific intervals during the day, so we also try and cluster students when we do that. As I'm sure many of you know, many of our students do not require support all day, nor would they benefit from that support all day, whether it be social, emotional, academic, or behavioral, other growth to get that all day. To give you an example, I was actually at an elementary school this morning in Milton visiting, and there was a student there, an absolutely lovely little girl, one of the sweetest girls I've seen in a very long time. She does require some extensive toileting and diapering support, and she also has some significant safety concerns with her mobility and navigating the school, particularly in some of our busy hallways and stairs. So she does have some educational support and assistance throughout the day, particularly with her toileting. However, she is quite independent, and a majority of her program can really be provided by the classroom teacher. There are some of those personal care needs with her for toileting and for diapering and for navigating some of the building, but otherwise the classroom teacher can support her. So there's big chunks of the day where there's not an educational assistant with her. I just want to emphasize that the classroom teacher is the primary responsible person in there for the planning and delivering of the program. They are responsible for the IEPs, if there's a behavior support plan, alternative programming, plans of care, et cetera, accommodations, modifications, assessment and evaluation. That all falls to the role of the teacher. And the EA is there to really support the personal care, safety, and alternative curriculum when those needs outweigh what the teacher can provide. One more piece I'll talk a little bit more later. We do really have a model of fading and reducing prompts. Many of our students, we really believe, can be supported effectively in a shared model and in a scheduled model. And EAs, all of our EAs really assist multiple students throughout the day. So we don't have a one-to-one support model. We don't attach EAs to individual students. We attach EAs to schools, but I'll speak more specific to that in a slide coming up. Knowing the learner. Our department, Special Education Services, I have a team that reports to me of instructional program leaders. There's 16 of them, where each one of them has a family of schools, elementary and secondary, and they're very connected with those schools, and they're in those schools very frequently, assessing students, help problem solve at the school level. Every spring, our department starts collecting a bunch of data from the school. So we go into the school and we get information about the student needs. We start collecting what are called student portraits and student needs assessments, where we collect the data this spring about the students for the upcoming school year. And we really start to gain not only the school level, but then we start to put together what the system view level is of priority needs, so we can determine the allocation around for each school. And some of the things we collect there, which you can see there, I thought I would just give a little bit of a descriptor of each one, just so you can understand what they mean, because a lot of that is some education talk there. So as an example, diagnostic information, just some examples of things we collect. We look at some of the medical data that the students may have. We look at some of the developmental data, age and stage. We look at cognitive considerations, mobility considerations. So we kind of get a little piece of all those little pieces of the student. Most of our students who do receive educational assistant support do have an educational plan, or an individual education plan. So we look within that of the program, the modifications, accommodations, what are the goals, if there's an alternative curriculum, safety and behavior support plans. Many of our students don't have a safety plan or don't have a behavior support plan in working with an EA, but if they do, we certainly collect that data because a lot of that data and those documents give us strategies for managing the safety concerns and access to alternative curriculum. I'm going to speak about that in just a minute. But we also look at the current level of independence. So what we really want to try to determine is what support is needed versus what can we build towards independence. And we really try to determine that by collecting that data at the school level. And we really try to determine what that level of independence is. Because as I stated earlier, and I'll state it again, it really is a FADE support model and a prompt support model, because we really want to try to foster that independence and that resiliency and that growth for our students. EA roles and responsibilities. It is really pared down into three major categories in terms of the roles and responsibilities of the EAs. And it falls under personal care, safety, and alternative curriculum. I'll just talk a little bit about personal care. So you have to think of it in terms of, there are some of these pieces in here that the teacher, whether it be the elementary teacher, the secondary teacher, or even in our kindergarten classes where we have DEC as educators, they can do and help with a lot of this personal care of teachers. And if they can help with that care, and it falls within the teaching staff responsibility, the teaching staff will do that. If the level of support exceeds what the teaching staff can provide, we do look at that educational support. So I think we have students helping with dressing as an example. I saw last week, there's a student who has cerebral palsy and needs some extensive help with some of their dressing. Toileting, I think, is pretty obvious. And feeding, lifting, positioning, transferring, lifting and positioning and transferring. We have a number of students who do require one-person or two-person lifts, whether they're going, from a mat to a change table or to a sensory piece of equipment. Communication, I won't get too much into that, but basically there's all kinds of different types of communication applications and pieces of equipment that many of our students use. To give you an example, I was at an elementary school in December, and there is a student there who uses eye gaze technology, where she has a piece of equipment where she is able to communicate with staff through eye blinking and eye gazing. But that piece of equipment does require a direct adult to operate and help with that communication device. That child and that student cannot manage that device herself. And there are times in the day where the teacher is unable to help specifically with that device. So we do provide some EA support. So that is just an example of where communication would fit. In terms of safety, there's sort of four main categories there. We really look at the frequency and intensity of the types of safety, and that is really through data tracking that the school provides to our team, which we can look at. So students that sort of fall under these categories, we do have documentation, a doc within our board, where it's called a behavior support plan tracker, where the staff will sort of track these types of behaviors, and we follow our AP, which is linked there. Plan student behavior prevention, management, and support. Self-injurious, as an example, I was recently just at a high school, and there is a student who is engaging in some headbanging. So we have a behavior plan, student support plan, prevention, management, support plan for that child. When he becomes dysregulated, he will bang his head, which is obviously a safety issue. So we have a plan in place where we do have some educational assistant time to help regulate him. Injurious to others is probably relatively self-explanatory on that one, so I don't need to get too much into that. In terms of assistance with self-regulation, the biggest piece around that is really looking at calming strategies and movement breaks, and it really is focused on some of our students who really can become very, with a heavy level of frequency and intensity, dysregulated. But we do find with management and support plan in terms of looking at calming strategies, movement breaks, calming spaces, sensory rooms, that sometimes that does require additional support where the teacher wouldn't be able to provide that. Functional mobility, basically a good example of that is, as we have students as an example that may transition from a standard to a walker, or say from a standard to a wheelchair, but they do require some adult assistance in order to transition from some of that equipment. And we also have some students who safely, as I gave an example earlier, can't always safely on their own navigate around a building. They have some mobility concerns or issues where they would need an adult to help them with that. So that is also a role where we would have the EA. Alternative curriculum, for those of you who don't know. So basically we have many students in our board who follow a fully or partially alternative curriculum. There are many different examples of where we put an alternative curriculum. I'll focus primarily on two of the main ones that we use an alternative curriculum for. Is it's not the Ontario curriculum, but there is the AFAC curriculum and there's the Carolina curriculum. A lot of times we use that in our CPE, Community Pathways Elementary program, and we use that in our CPP, Community Pathways program in secondary as well too, where some of our students are working on alternative goals. Some of our students, secondary is the best example for this, have a fully alternative curriculum. So we have a number of our students in our CPP program who are on fully alternative curriculum. Then we have some other students where it might be partial alternative curriculum, where the students are able to access and be assessed and evaluated on the Ontario curriculum. So we certainly give them that opportunity. And some of their day or some of their programming is partial alternative curriculum. Some of this alternative curriculum really is focused on personal care needs and safety needs, and it really is focused on supporting their growth and independence. But sometimes, in many circumstances, in many of our CPP classes, as an example in secondary, the teacher is fully able to deliver that alternative curriculum. But sometimes some of our students, their personal care needs or their safety needs, as an example, the one student who becomes dysregulated with headbanging, there are moments where it does exceed the responsibility of the teacher, so we do have an EA in there to support, whereas the child would not be able to have access to the curriculum, whether it be, say, the alternative one or the Ontario curriculum, without some additional assistance, just because their personal care needs or safety needs outweigh what the teacher can deliver. A little sip of water here. The role of SES. So that's just sort of gives you a brief flavor there of the role of what our department does and our team. So obviously it's a collaboration process. So first the schools collaborate with parents and caregivers and get that feedback from them and trying to determine the level of independence of their child. And then our team does connect with principals, with CERTs, and with CCAs at the high schools or at the secondary schools to really get that perspective and determine that site-specific needs. And then we really look at the site-specific needs and weigh that against the needs across the entire system. So we always work with the schools in terms of problem solving the site-specific needs, whether looking at EA schedules, getting creative and clustering kids, looking at timetables, opportunities for shared or partial support. And then we also have to look at that system level need too as well and really assess the system-wide priorities. We need to ensure that there's equity across schools, across the system, that is really student focused and focused on those individual student needs. So we really collect the student needs assessment. We get the data of the student complexity, safety, and the care requirements. We look at the system-wide priorities. And then once we allocate to the schools, the principals then decide how the EAs are deployed within that school. We constantly review allocation on a regular basis throughout the year. So we don't typically have new EAs join programs within the year, but we do have the flexibility to reassess all schools and all sites within our system. And then as needed throughout the year, we can do some reallocation of EAs. As we know, people move in and out of our board. We have students whose needs change where they may show progression that we've worked really hard at that FADE support model, that prompts, FADE beta prompts, that students showing more independence, and that role of the EA isn't quite as required. So we do review that regularly. And if needed, we can move EAs in between sites. We don't typically add EAs into the system throughout the year. It is looking at our school-based sites and allocating sort of internally through that process like that. So there's just some more last slide here, just deployment in schools. So allocations are provided to the schools. We really want to emphasize that we do our very best to not assign EAs to students. We don't support the one-to-one model in the sense of it's not always in the best interest of the student. As I said previously, social, emotionally, and academically for their growth. We really want to foster that gradual independence. We are really looking at how we can effectively share and schedule that support. So principals do need to come up with create a plan that is very fluid and dynamic and responsive to the needs of the collective students. And some of the reasons the principals do have some of that autonomy within their schools is, as we know, day to day, week to week, even month to month, those needs can change. Our EA support is a FADE model. We're really fostering that independence. And the schools are doing their very best to look at locations of classes, how we can cluster students, maybe pairing students in certain grades if that's a possibility, and getting creative in some of those pieces. So I think that hopefully gives you just a little bit of flavor of the role of the EA and how we do some of the deployment in some of our schools and how we collect some of the data. It is something that's done this spring. So we collect all the data this spring. We give schools sort of tentative EA allocations in the month of May. Schools sort of hit the ground running in September, and then we kind of see what students have arrived, what students did not arrive, what new students we have, and then we do very quick reassessment of all schools and all sites in the month of September. So my team is on the ground spending every single day for about the first 3 weeks of school, going in and assessing how the kids are doing, looking at what the data is, and then we make some very quick decisions if we need to reallocate and move some EAs around within the system into the month of October. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. That was excellent. I think that's probably a topic that parents often have questions about and don't necessarily understand how holistically the EA support system or support model, works throughout the board. So that was excellent. Does anyone have any questions or comments? No? Okay. Seeing none. Thank you so much, Conan. That was like I said, it was excellent, and I think it was very timely based on your description of what's happening in the system. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. So we will move on now to item 3, which is the SEAC discussion and question period. If anyone has any questions or topics they'd like to raise, I invite you to do so now. We've had quite a bit of discussion this evening, so we might be a little bit talked out, but if there's anything that you'd like to raise in this forum, please go ahead and do so now. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody raising their hand, so we will move on to item 4, which is communications to SEAC, and we'll start 4.1 with our superintendent's report.
Wonderful, thank you. So first I'd like to start by welcoming Tara Conley. Many of you are aware that Melissa Summer stepped back from SEAC due to a change in her eligibility, and so we returned to all of the candidates that applied for the member at large position back in November 2022, and Tara was one of those candidates who had been successfully interviewed and in essence had been shortlisted should Summer not accept the position. So pleased that Tara can join us for the remainder of this SEAC term. So thanks for joining us tonight and for the balance of this term. We are well underway in our staffing process for the 25-26 school year. As Conan has described around the process for EA allocations. Similarly, we're in the process of building our self-contained classes for next year. Those classes have been based on the IPRC placement decisions in order to add or demit a student from a placement. And I'll have Conan give a little overview of where we're at with that process.
Yeah, thanks, Colette. So the process is, as we know, IPRC happens all throughout the year. So every month of the school year, there is an IPRC. And we have some months where we do more than one IPRC meeting, depending on the needs in terms of referrals and students that are being brought forward. A bulk of our IPRC and a bulk of our numbers do come through in the winter. So we usually get a very good sense by April, so in the next week, in terms of how many students we have coming through who will be going into self-contained classes. It is a bit of a balancing act in terms of we still have students who come through May, June, and July. And as we know, some of our classes do have caps or do have approximate numbers that we are looking at doing. So we do our very best to do that. And then we kind of continue to reevaluate in the spring based upon numbers. As you know, the IPRC process, we also have students who do come through with placement, and sometimes those parents will also change their mind or decline the placement. So it is a tricky balance. We don't have finalized numbers yet. My team is actually working on that over the next couple of weeks. In terms of parents in getting placement where they've gone through IPRC, they've received that exceptionality. They might have been informed that they have a self-contained class, but we are letting parents know in April in terms of what the location will be if they have not been given a location. Tentative numbers in terms across the system. So in our CPP program in secondary, we are looking at already a little slight increase of the amount of CPP students that we have across the system. Some schools might be down a little bit, but overall we are up in CPP. So that it's not necessarily classes per se, but we're looking at high school secondary sections in terms of how we offer, where there probably will see an increase. We are seeing also a slight increase in the amount of students meeting the criteria to go into a CPE, Community Pathways Elementary class, formerly called the Life Skills class. So we are anticipating that program growing a little bit into September, but we're just waiting to sort of finalize numbers. Gifted is very stable, so it's very similar numbers that we've seen last year. I don't have a finalized number on that, but very similar, sort of stable to what we've seen last year. Art classes, academic resource classes, which were formerly called LD. Again, don't have finalized numbers there, but we are seeing actually a decline in the number of students who are coming through meeting that identification. That really is, in my opinion, a success story. It really is, in my opinion, a link to some of the early intervention strategies we have been doing at the primary level and into the junior level, and the rollout in some of our foundations programs, in our Wilson Reading Intervention program. And we've really had a push in our board to try to do some of that early intervention and some of the beyond that tier 1, tier 2, and going into tier 3. So we are actually seeing less students coming through with exceptionalities of LD currently to meet the criteria for our classes. So we do see that also trending down. We also have within our elementary, and I'll wrap up here, we have KELP, Alpha, and Communication Pathways program. Those are very stable too. We're getting sort of similar referrals to that, and we sort of anticipate that program relatively staying stable. So that's kind of a reflection, and hopefully we'll be able to share more information in a couple of months.
Before I move on from that, I just want to make sure that was a lot of information. If there's any questions for Conan on that staffing process.
I guess I'll ask quickly. If we have stable gifted numbers, are you anticipating any changes to the number of classrooms for self-contained gifted for next year, or status quo? And particularly North Halton, they lost their class, right? So it's not coming back.
Yeah, I can't make any promises, but based upon initial numbers, we're looking at either the same or a slight increase in the number of classes. But I can't finalize that yet.
Okay, but North Halton is unlikely to be recovered at this point. The North Halton, I guess they lost more in their primary. The primary, yeah. It was primary gifted was taken away this year, and it's not coming back.
Sorry, just to clarify, in North Halton, it was the junior intermediate class.
Yes.
That we closed and moved to Milton. So that remains the plan for next year, that there wouldn't be a viable class in Halton Hills. And so students are being offered a Milton placement.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. But on the topic of gifted, certainly in Oakville, we are seeing increased numbers in students meeting criteria for gifted. We're certainly experiencing a challenge with our elementary sites in terms of accommodating the vast number of students. We are fine for next year, so this we're really looking further down the road to September 2026, so not next school year, but the year after that, looking at opening some additional sites for gifted to take some of the accommodation pressures off of our 2 existing sites. And also, we spoke last year about the expansion, or maybe it was 2 years ago, I'm sorry, about the expansion of our secondary cluster sites. And we are proceeding with, again, for September 26th, so not this coming September, but in a year's time, expanding to White Oaks Secondary School and T.A. Blakelock in Oakville.
Expanding to 2?
The secondary gifted clusters, yes.
Okay. That's good to know. I'm sure you're going to get some upset people again because people don't like change. We'll address that when it happens.
And that's fair. And what we did learn from last time is longer notice. So, so that was certainly the goal around ensuring that we be communicating with grade 6 students about their secondary school.
That's a very good idea. Thank you. That will make my job easier too. So thank you very much.
Fair.
Do you know, and maybe you don't yet, is it that we've had more identifications by the board, more private identifications, or more decisions for placement with the same number of screenings? I'd like to understand where the growth is coming from so I can see sort of how things are changing there. Do you know?
So yes, I can say that we are seeing more students meeting the level 1 and level 2 cutoffs for the gifted process through the grade 4 screening. And then when students make it through to the level 2 and get an assessment, we're seeing a slight increase, but it's a trending increase in the number of students that are meeting criteria through that process as well. So
across the board, or just
no,
Oakville?
is the most significant trend.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, that's great information. Thank you so much.
No problem. Just two other things to touch on. Our ASSDP program is continuing this spring, and Conan's going to give an update on what's happening with that after-school program.
Yes, so I've said it many times, it's a great program. Information's already gone out to parents. It is a Saturday morning program, a coaching session where parents who have students ASD, they get a play-based modeling coaching, setting up play and taking turn activities, individual strategies to increase communication, teacher-led individual and group activities run by our staff. It is at Alexander's Public School in Burlington, starts on April 26th and goes every Saturday except for the Victoria Day weekend right through until June 21st. I go to a lot of them myself. It is a super fun, positive experience. And one of the biggest benefits of it is some parents really get to connect with other parents, make new friends, play dates happen, coffee chat times, all those kind of things. So it really is, it's been a positive experience that we're on year 2 of doing. So we'll keep the good times rolling.
And the last item I have for you is a 25-26 budget update. Normally at this time we would have a fairly good sense of the timing from the ministry, but due to the provincial election, the timelines are a bit delayed. We are still going to have Superintendent Nagoy attend our April SEAC meeting to gather input into the draft budget that goes forward to the board for approval hopefully in June. Hopefully we get it all before our last board meeting in June. And that's it for me. Happy to take any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Superintendent Reddick? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to association reports. Please indicate by raising your hand if you would like to share anything from your association this evening. Okay, I don't see any hands raised, so we'll move on to item 4.3, which is the trustees report. Trustee Zhang, I believe you are going to go this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Baxter, and hello, everyone. I have 2 updates for today. The first is HDSB recently sent multiple emails to students about the up-to-date immunization records. HDSB and Halton Region Public Health are prioritizing the records submitted for the students born in 2011, 2012, and 2017. Parents, guardians are encouraged to log in the Immunization Connect Ontario to verify the online record has been updated and to make sure no additional vaccines are required. If you have questions, please contact your local school or Halton Region Public Health. The second one is about the April. April is the HLF month. HLF stands for Halton Learning Foundation. Halton Learning Foundation is the only charity solely dedicated to the HDSB. HLF month is an opportunity for the schools and the community to raise awareness and funds to eliminate the financial challenges that prevent students from accessing the complete education. HLF month unites schools, organizations, and individuals in activities, challenges, and events designed to support the mission of assisting students in the Halton District School Board by addressing crucial needs such as school supplies, food, clothing, and learning resources. HLF empowers students to succeed and reach their full potential. HDSB community can support Halton Learning Foundation by participating in the fundraising events and attending the Student in the Spotlight show. The show will be hosted by the Burlington Central High School on April 30th at 7 p.m. Tickets can be purchased at HLF website. Thank you. That's for tonight.
Thank you so much, Trustee Zhang. So we'll move on now to item 4.4, which is our committee reports. So we have two standing committees that have SEAC representation. The first being the Accessibility and Coordinating Committee. Katie has graciously offered to represent SEAC on that committee. I also represent trustees on there, so I can share that the committee has not yet had a meeting since our last SEAC meeting, but there will be one in, I think it's May 1st or the very end of April. And so the next meeting we may have an update, depending on what that date was. And then the other committee we have representation on is the Mental Health and Wellbeing Strategy Steering and Advisory Committee. Kate, is there?
Yes, and I have an update because
Yay.
Thank you. I got looped into the meetings after our last board meeting where I said I had no information. I am now on the calendar for all the meetings to the end of the year, and we had a meeting. And it's a good thing because this is the year to begin the ministry mandated overhaul or review, big review of the 3-year mental health and well-being strategy. So what that means is between now and June, if anyone in this group has anything specifically that they would like to feed in as an input, you're welcome to get in touch with me, and I am happy to make sure that your perspective is brought forward into the consideration of the plan, and I will bring back updates to this committee as that progresses.
Great. Thank you so much, Kate. I'm just wondering if there's maybe some information that could go out about the committee. Maybe Laura can help with just distributing some information about what the activities of the committee are now, and then perhaps people can provide feedback to you as required or as I'd like to. Does that make sense?
Maybe Kate and I can chat about what kind of feedback they're looking for, and then formulate what that looks like in terms of gathering SEAC's input. Does that make sense, Kate?
Yeah, so I have literally right in front of me on the monitor next to me, there's sort of pillars of the areas that they're focusing on in the strategy, and they're, I think, not looking to change those areas of focus, but simply to ensure that their strategy, which I think should be on the website somewhere because it's a ministry mandated plan for people to review. They're just looking to see that they're doing a good job at meeting those specific goals and whether they need to do anything to change their approach. So it's the first is improve student awareness and access to support. The second is basically an inclusive environment, in particular for people who are disproportionately negatively affected, and special education needs is under that umbrella. Bolster mental health promotion and early intervention by school staff, and empower students, parents, and caregivers in engaging in mental health initiatives. So they're looking to sort of come up with detail under each of those 4 categories as a long-term plan for the next 3 years.
So Kate, I think Superintendent Ruddock will reach out and discuss with you sort of what they're looking for, and perhaps that's an agenda item for next month. Something to consider. So thank you so much for making it to the meeting, and it does sound like your timing was perfect. So we're very appreciative that you're at that table representing us. Thank you. So we're now at item 5, which is the next agenda. Are there any items, I guess we've just touched on one that may show up on our next agenda, but is there anything else that anyone would like to throw out there as agenda items for an upcoming meeting? As always, if you think of anything, please send an email along. And that takes us to the end of our meeting. So we are at item 6.0, which is adjournment. We have exhausted our agenda. So I will go ahead and adjourn our meeting with a reminder that we will next be gathering on April 23rd at the usual time, 7 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice evening.